Welcome, everyone, to Fundamentals of Kabbalah and Hasidut, continuing our series on war and peace in Jewish tradition. Today, we are continuing learning about Mashiach and the Messianic era. And I should tell you that the plan is to next week to conclude this series. The series has been going on for almost 4 months now. When I started, I had no idea it would go this long, but Baruch Hashem, it did. And tonight it's going to exclusively be about Mashiach and the Messianic era. And next week, we are going to conclude with what happens after the Messianic era, with the emphasis on peace. We want to end this series talking about peace. But other things, according to tradition, will happen also. The resurrection of the dead, the world to come, a day that is all Shabbat. So we're going to delve into that next week and conclude with ideas about Shalom. So before we start, I want to say something I've said before, and especially when we're talking about Mashiach, that there are many different opinions, there are many different traditions regarding Mashiach and the Messianic era. We've been looking into them, and we've been mentioning differences of opinions. I want to mention, we could ask, well, where does the differences come from? So we have a tradition from the prophets, actually from the Torah itself. We touched on that last week, that there will be a Redeemer. There will be a Messianic era. But there were, again, as we learned from the Rambam, the details were never spelled out. And so as the generations progressed, different people saw different things in the words of the prophets. Many of them are based on verses, and others are based on traditions. Others are based on what's called chidush, a moment of clarity. But a lot of it is based on verses. And so I just want to mention that, because tonight I will introduce many different ideas about Mashiach. But as we'll see, not everyone agrees. And as Rambam says, truthfully, it's not all that important, because we simply will not know until it actually happens. The most important thing to say, though, is we have an absolute tradition that there will be a messianic figure and there will be a messianic age. More than that, it's somewhat, we use the expression, in the cloud, to know exactly how it's going to play itself out. And it's very, very important to mention that the concept of Mashiach, the Rambam said that we don't even have to talk about it a lot, because all the prophets talked about it. It's not like just one or two prophets gave over one or two prophecies. It runs through all of the prophetic books. And again, it goes back to the Torah itself. We looked at the blessing that Yaakov gave to Yehuda, and we discussed about in the book of Devarim very, very clearly how after a long, hard, cruel exile, God will gather the Jews back to Eretz Yisrael, the kibbutz galiyot, and the land will turn green, the cities will be rebuilt, sovereignty will be reestablished. And we've seen all of that. We're living it right now. And so, in a sense, there can be no doubt that the rest of the prophecies will be fulfilled, and that is of a messianic figure and a messianic age and peace in the world. Had we not been gathered in the last approximately 140 years, if Israel would not have been rebuilt, if the state of Israel never would have come into being, if Israel has turned into the technological powerhouse that it is, then we could say, well, okay, we have a tradition of a messianic figure, but I'm not sure. But we've seen so many of the prophecies actualized in our day. Then for anyone with basic faith can have no doubt that all the other prophecies will be fulfilled. So I want to start tonight in, if anyone wants to follow, in the 11th chapter of Isaiah. Of all of the prophets, it's written that next to Moshe, the most important prophet was Isaiah. His prophecies, his symbolic poetry and allegory woven into the prophecies are quoted all over the place. And his messianic prophecies are many, many, many. I've chosen just one here because it's very indicative of all of them. So if anyone, I'm going to just read it in English. It's the very beginning of the 11th chapter of Isaiah. And it says like this. And I should mention that each one of these verses is part and parcel of the whole messianic tradition. And the verses that different sages would try to understand how they will manifest. So Isaiah starts, and there shall come forth a root out of the stem of Yishai. Now, of course, Yishai is the father of David. And of course, we refer to Mashiach as Mashiach ben David. David's father was Yishai. So he says, and there shall come forth a rod out of the stem of Yishai, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. And the Spirit of God shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of God. And his delight shall be in the fear and awe of God. And he is now talking about the messianic figure. And he shall not judge after the sight of his eyes, neither decide after the hearing of his ears, but with righteousness shall he judge the poor, and decide with equity for the meek of the earth. And he shall smite the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips shall he slay the wicked. And righteousness shall be the girdle of his loins, and faithfulness the girdle of his reins. The wolf also shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the kid, and the calf and the young lion and the fatling together, and a little child shall lead them. And the cow and the bear shall feed. The young ones shall lie down together. And the lion shall eat straw like the ox, and the suckling child play on the hole of the cobra, and the weaned child shall put his hand on the viper's nest. They shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth shall be full of the knowledge of God as the waters cover the sea. It actually continues, but we're going to stop there. So for those who have been coming to all of these classes, many of the ideas that we've already mentioned are contained in these short 10 verses. Now remember, this is just one of many, many prophecies of Isaiah about a messianic figure. And as I said, so many of these are quoted in different contexts. Okay, so I want to add one more prophecy from Isaiah, from the second chapter, the second and third verses. And again, when you hear this, many people will recognize these verses. It shall come to pass in the last days that the mountain of God's house shall be established on the mountaintops and exalted above the hills. All the nations shall flow into it. Many people shall go and say, come, and let us go up to the mountain of God, to the house of the God of Yaakov, and he will teach us his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth Torah, and the word of God from Yerushalayim. Ki mitzion tetzei Torah, u'devar Hashem miYerushalayim. We say this every time we open the ark to take out the Torah for a public reading. So here, I'll start from this one. Here we see this idea that is given over many times, this universalistic vision of the Messianic era, that the Mashiach will come, and here it's mentioning the, without using exact words, but the rebuilding of the third temple, and that all peoples will come up to Yerushalayim, and God, through the Jewish people, will teach the whole world the Torah. And the first one, of course, will be Mashiach himself. And it ends by saying that because out of Zion will come the Torah and the word of God from Yerushalayim. So this is one of many, many universal type of vision of the Messianic era, where all peoples will come together, there'll be peace, and the knowledge of God will cover the world like the waters cover the sea. In the first prophecy that we just read from the 11th chapter, we have the source of what we've discussed before, this idea of the wolf lying down with the lamb, and the lion with the lamb, and the cow and the bear eating together. And so, as we've discussed, here's an example where there are verses where different people interpret it differently. The Rambam, as we learned, says this is an allegory. nature will not change in this way, at least in the beginning of the Messianic era. The Ramban disagrees. He says there will be a fundamental change in nature. And some actually say that in the Garden of Eden, we human beings were not vegetations, vegetarians. My wife in the distance saves me all the time. Vegetarians. But according to tradition, all animals were vegetarians also. It was only after the sin, now again, not everyone agrees with this, that nature changed and certain animals became carnivorous. This is based on the 11th chapter, where Isaiah mentions, it appears that the not only animals will not eat each other, but human beings won't be afraid of it. A child will put his hand by the viper and not be afraid. And so here, this is a basic disagreement. I found, since we've learned that there's actually, and this comes up often, and there's much discussion about it, where the Rambam in the Mishnah Torah will say a certain something. And then in Guide to Perplexed, he will say the opposite. And this happens actually many times. And it happens when talking about Mashiach also, where in the Mishnah Torah, Rambam takes a very strong stand that nature will not change. And in fact, he even agrees with the sage Shmuel that the only difference between the Messianic era will be that we won't be subjugated to the nations. But we learned already, even in the Mishnah Torah, right at the end, when he starts to describe the Messianic era, it sounds totally like there'll be a change in nature and human consciousness. Now listen what he says here. This is in one of the writings of Rambam, not the Mishnah Torah, talking about Mashiach. So he says, even the most insignificant Jew will see from one end of the world to the other, from the first generations to the last, and nothing will dim his sight from seeing and knowing. Anyone who opens a Torah scroll will reveal in it the secrets of creation and the secrets of the holy chariot. At a glance, he will behold more wonders and truth than tens of thousands have seen in all of their generations. And then he ends by quoting the same quote that he ends the Mishnah Torah, for the earth shall be full of the knowledge of God like the waters cover the sea. So here we see, even in the teachings of Rambam, he gives two divergent versions of what it will be like in the Messianic era. And the way that this is answered here and many other questions is, again, something that we've discussed already. Is Mashiach coming in the clouds of the sky, which is a verse, or is he coming lowly riding on a donkey? And we've learned that this is connected to what's called the Ita Achishena. In its time, I will hasten it. It will be hastened if we merit it. And if we merit it, almost everyone holds, and here it appears the Rambam as well, if we merit, then the Mashiach will come in a much more miraculous manner. If it comes at an appointed time and we're not so meritorious, then it will come in a more natural way. Okay. So now, this is really an amazing thing. We're not going to go into depths about this, but there are 10 different versions how long the Messianic era will last. Each one is based either on a statement of the sages, mostly in the Tractate of Sanhedrin. We've quoted Sanhedrin a number of times when talking about Mashiach. There are 20 pages in the Tractate of Sanhedrin, approximately from page 90 through page 110. This is the longest continual, what's called Agadata in the entire Shas, in the entire Talmud. There's 20 straight pages of Agadata, of the more mystical, allegorical understandings of the Torah. And in this 20 pages, most of the discussions about Mashiach, the resurrection of the dead, and the world to come are contained in these 20 pages. So many of the opinions, how long will the Messianic age last, are based on different opinions in the Talmud, which are based on different verses in the prophets. So I'm not going to go into each one and talk about where they learn it from. That would just take us too long. But I'm just going to read different opinions. The first opinion is the Messianic era will last for only 40 years, to be followed, and this we'll have to talk about more next week, by the resurrection of the dead and the world to come. Another version is 70 years. The next is 3 generations. The fourth one is 365 years. Then 400 years, 2,000 years. There's actually one here that's not mentioned that I've heard is 1,000 years. But here it's mentioned 2,000 years. The next one is the amount of time that elapsed from God's oath that the flood would disappear until the days of Mashiach commenced. Well, when that statement was made, it wasn't known when the Mashiach is coming. So it's hard to put a number on that one. At this point, we're talking about 4,000 to 4,500 years. Then the eighth opinion is the amount of time from creation until the days of Mashiach. Now, depending on how you interpret when the creation happened, it could be anywhere from 5,784 years to, I suppose, 15 billion years, depending on how you want to understand the time of creation. Then there's an opinion of 7,000 years. And the last one is 365,000 years. These are all opinions brought by different commentaries based on different verses or traditions that were handed down. So, like I said, we're not going to go into detail, but we see how many different ideas there are here. And this is where it's very important to go back to what the Rambam says, that it's not worth our time an effort to try to figure out any of these, because when it happens, we'll know. And it will unfold the way it is meant to unfold. More than that, we don't know. Okay, 1 second. Okay. As I said, next week, we're going to delve more into what happens after the Messianic era. When does Techiyat HaMeitim happen, the resurrection of the dead? How will that happen? And we'll learn different traditions, and the same thing with the world to come. But now we're going to continue with different ideas about Mashiach. So there's one statement in the Talmud that says 3 things come in what's called kehereth ayin, which means a blink of the eye. 3 things come in the blink of the eye. And the first one is Mashiach. Mashiach will come a blink in the eye. It won't be this like long process. I mean, it is a long process. It's like thousands of years it's been in process. And right now we're in what's called the footsteps of the Mashiach. But the idea is that when it's time for Mashiach to reveal himself, it will just happen. It won't be like one time, see if my wife is listening here. One time we were traveling across country, and it was in, I believe, Nebraska. And we're driving, I think it was highway, let's say 70, major highway. And we see a billboard that says, "You are now 110 miles from the Corn Palace," in the name of this little town in Nebraska. Okay. Then about 5 miles later, big billboard, "You're now 105 miles from the Corn Palace." We could not believe it. Like every 5 or 10 miles, like a different way to like hook you into going. So when we got there, there was no way in the world that we couldn't go. Like it worked. And we went, and the truth is, it was amazing. It was this huge building, and the outside of the building was made of corn husks, but of different colors. Many people don't know this, that corn can be yellow or white or green or blue or red. One time I grew blue corn. And the whole outside of it was a mural made from corn husk. And then inside they had pictures of every year. They do it over every year. So, I mean, it's maybe a stupid example, but the idea that Mashiach, it's not going to be in another 100 years, Mashiach is coming. In another 99 and a half years, Mashiach is coming. When Mashiach comes, it will be what's called Kehereth. Brenda just put up a link to the Corn Palace. And it looks like Brenda knows it also. It was like the most amazing, successful advertising and promotion I've ever seen. Anyways, what are the other 2 things that come kehereth ayin, in a blink of the eye? So the Talmud says finding a lost object. You're looking and like, where is it? And you check everything, every pocket, every room, every drawer, right? And then when it's time to find it, it's just there. It's just there. There are no like leads when you're going to find it. And the last one is being bit by a scorpion. And my wife has been bit a number of times, and it always comes terrifying. You don't expect it. You don't see it. You just put your hand someplace, and the next thing you know, your hand is like throbbing. So those are the three things. So obviously I'm mentioning this because of Mashiach. And that's, if you remember the story we told, when Yeshua ben Levi had the privilege to be in the presence of the soul of Mashiach and said, when are you coming? And he said, today. And what he meant is today, Hayom im b'kolo tishma'u. Today, if you listen to his voice, meaning it can come at any time. It can come at any time. So that's a very, very important idea. Another idea that we touched upon, but we didn't maybe discuss it as much as possible, is the idea is, does the Mashiach know himself that he's the Mashiach? And almost everyone agrees no. And the example that they bring is Moshe. And it's the right example because our mystical tradition is Moshe is Mashiach. Hu Goel Rishon, Hu Goel Acharon. He's the first Redeemer, and he will be the last Redeemer. And we see Moshe was 80 years old when he stood at the burning bush. And he even argued with God for a whole week. I'm not the one, I can't speak, there are better people than me. And this is brought as the prototype or the main example that Mashiach is not born with the consciousness, I'm Mashiach, and I have to wait till I grow up and I'm mature, or certain circumstances happen, and then I'll reveal myself. According to tradition, it won't happen like that. Mashiach doesn't know that he's Mashiach until God will reveal it to him that you are the Redeemer. And in a sense, this is actually a good thing, because what did we say about Moshe? He was the most humble person on the face of the earth. So we can imagine, and this was part of the problem. We didn't go into depth, but we did mention the idea that Rabbi Akiva felt that Bar Chachma was the Mashiach. Many people say he thought that he was a prospective Mashiach. Other people say that he felt that he was Mashiach ben Yosef, or in potential he could be the Mashiach. And for 2.5 years, Bar Chachma defeated the Romans, kicked the Romans out of Israel, and began to create a kingdom with the intent of rebuilding the temple. Some say they were about to start rebuilding the third temple. And things look like, whoa, this is everything they said, could happen. And then apparently his ego got in the way. He was a big neshama, but his ego got in the way. And so this idea that Mashiach doesn't know that he's Mashiach until God reveals it to him is a great advantage. Because you can imagine if someone is born with the knowledge, I am Mashiach, it could lead to psychological, emotional, spiritual problems or challenges. But if you can imagine, it would be very difficult to know that you're Mashiach, and yet you can't reveal yourself. God doesn't give you permission yet. The circumstances aren't right. So that's why almost everyone agrees that Mashiach will not know that they are Mashiach until the time comes. Okay, so we mentioned already that Moshe is the soul of Mashiach. Then we say, well, what about David? It's Mashiach ben David. So the idea in Kabbalah and Chassidut is that the nefesh of Mashiach will be David. And the more, we'll call it the neshama of Mashiach will be Moshe. It will be a combination of David and Mashiach. And that's why the Arizal, when he read the word Adam, he said the Aleph of Adam is Adam, the Daled is David, and the Mem is Mashiach. Because he saw that David and Mashiach are obviously connected. But the Mem, when the Arizal said Mashiach, we could also read it Adam, David, Moshe. Because Moshe is Mashiach. And another way to read it also is the Aleph is Avraham. Avram, David, Mashiach. Avram, David, Moshe. But another allusion to Moshe being the soul of Mashiach is in Kohelet, in the beginning of Ecclesiastes. It says, Ma shehaya hu sheyiyah. That which was is that which will be. And the Arizal looked at this verse and he saw in Ruach HaKodesh that the mem of ma, the shin of shehaya, and the hey of who, ma shehaya, spells out Moshe. But what's the next word? Sheyiyah. That which was is that which will be. So that's why the Ari says Moshe is Mashiach. But the statement of Hu HaGoel Rishon v'Hu HaGoel Achron comes way before the Arizal. So here, this is just a hint that Ma shehaya hu sheyiyah. That which was is that which will be. Now, another amazing thing that I saw, it's actually, I forgot about it. It's in 70 Faces. And that is, we know that the four-letter name of God, Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey, equals 26. And we also know that we never say the name the way it's written because we don't know how to pronounce it. It was known, but it's hidden now. And so we say it with the four letters of Aleph and Daled and Nun and Yud. We call it Adni. And when we say a bracha, Baruch Atah Hashem, we use always the name Adonai. That equals 65. And so 26 and 65 equals 91. And this is brought a lot because that's the gematria of Sukkah. Sukkah equals 91. And so we're told that the whole experience of being in the Sukkah is like being surrounded with the name of God, the way that it is written and the way that we pronounce it. Another important numerical value of 91 is Amen. Another one is of Melech is 90, but with the Kollel is 91. Also, an angel is a Malach. So Malach equals 91. So this is the idea of when we add 26 and 65, the way that we read or write God's name and the way we pronounce it. But I learned this from Rav Ginsburg. This is something we learned already, that the Lubavitcher Rebbe, very close towards the end of his life, so he, in a very startling speech that he gave, he said, I've done everything that I can do to bring Mashiach. The rest is in your hands. And of course, in Chabad, there was like an earthquake. And then he continued in this talk, and he said, the way to bring Mashiach is to take Orot de Tohu Bekelim de Tikkun. The lights of Tohu, the awesome lights of the previous world of Tohu that shattered the vessels, shattered the Sfirot. And this world, which is a reconstituted attempt to fix the broken vessels. That's why the Ari called it the Olama Tikkun, the world of rectification. So the Lubavitcher Rebbe said, to bring Mashiach, we have to take these awesome lights and create proper vessels for them. And that is what will bring Mashiach. And so if you take these two numerical values that we just talked about, 26, which is the numerical value of the 4 letters of God's name, and 65, which is the numerical value of the way that we say God's name, and you multiply them. In other words, 26 times 65 equals 1690, which equals exactly Orot de Tohu Bekelim de Tikkun. I just saw it again today. I'd forgotten about this teaching. But what it's telling us, if we go back to what we quoted it again today, we've quoted it many times from Isaiah, and we read it right at the beginning of the class in the 11th chapter, that Malah ha'oretz deya et Hashem kamayim liyam mechasim, that the knowledge of God will cover the earth like the waters cover the sea. And so this idea of God's name, the way it's written and the way we pronounce it, it means that the revelation will be that we'll be able to be the world, finite reality, will able to be the proper vessel for these awesome lights that God will reveal. So again, 26 times 65 is 1690, equals exactly Orot de Tohu Bekelim de Tikkun. And Rav Ginsburg speaks about this all the time. And he always adds to it the idea of, like the Lubavitcher Rebbe said, is that we have to, as much as possible, envision and live as if Mashiach is here already, which is called drawing the future into the present. And so by making vessels for this great light, that is what will help bring Mashiach. Be'ezrat Hashem. Now I want to follow up with a discussion we had last week where we went through the somewhat convoluted lineage of Mashiach. I'm not going to go back over it, but we went through how mysteriously, call it even strangely, the seed of Mashiach comes from Lot and his incestuous relationship with his daughter. Even though she meant well, from that comes Ruth, and from Ruth comes David. And then we had the incident of Yehuda and Tamar, also a very mysterious event that happened. And that's on the father's side, that Peretz comes from that union, and from that comes Yishai, and from that comes David. And we also had just the whole way Ruth and Boaz got together, and the way that David is born in very convoluted circumstances. And we discussed that because for a holy soul, or a string of holy souls to come into the world, we'll call it the other side, would not just allow this to happen. God made everything balanced, good inclination and evil inclination, good and evil, Eitz Hadat Tov V'Ra. And so for a messianic figure to come into the world, it would by definition arouse tremendous opposition. And so it's explained that the soul of Mashiach comes through these very, very strange unions in order, let's say symbolically, that the soul had to come through the back door. It had to like sneak in. And we discussed that in Kabbalah, it's talked about that this is one of the deepest meanings of a gematria that we've mentioned scores of times in different circumstances. But the numerical value of the Nachash, the snake, is the same as Mashiach, 358. And the way to understand it is these are opposing forces. But just like the Eitz Hadat Tov V'Ra, according to the Zohar, shared the same root system with the tree of life. Usually we think of the tree of life as its own thing, and Eitz Hadat Tov V'Ra almost very negatively. But there's nothing wrong with the Eitz Hadat Tov V'Ra. It's just they weren't supposed to eat it when they ate it. But the Zohar says that they shared the same root system. So the Nachash and Mashiach share the same root system symbolically. But the call it the evil side, the Yetzer Hara side, the other side of the Nachash has to be redeemed, has to be refined, has to be uplifted. Without that, it is the snake. But it can be, and it will be, uplifted and fixed and rectified and healed. And because the soul of the Mashiach comes from a very fallen place, that is Dafka will give him the power to overcome the snake. Remember last week we learned in the Zohar, whoever can kill the snake will merit the daughter of the king. And that's Malchut. That's what we call Mashiach, Melech Mashiach, the king. He's the messianic king. And he will be the one who will kill the snake, but it's more like he will transpose the snake. So that's a lead into what I want to add here now, is in Sanhedrin, in the Tractate of Sanhedrin, there are different opinions. What's the name of Mashiach? I'm not going to go into all the different names, but one of them is Yanun. Yanun Shemo. And this comes from the psalm that David wrote for his son Shlomo. And here, Ben David, Shlomo had enormous potential, incredible potential. And he didn't succeed in his vision, but his vision was a total messianic vision of bringing the entire world together. As discussed, that was one of the reasons why he married 1,000 women. His intention was to take all the sparks of the world and to gather them all together. And his vision of the third temple, of the first temple, was the way we talk about the third temple, as a house of prayer for all people. That's how he saw it. So David wrote one of his psalms for Shlomo, and in it he refers to Shlomo as Yanun Shemo. Now, the word Yanun is obviously close to the letter Nun. And we know from Ashrei, Ashrei is an acrostic. Each verse begins with one of the letters of the alphabet, except for the Nun. David HaMelech leaves out the Nun, but he puts it in the next one. Somech Hashem l'kol noflim. God lifts up, God supports all those who are fallen. So why didn't David want to put in the Nun? Because the essence of David's soul was a fallen soul. And that's why in the Talmud, his soul and the soul of Mashiach are referred to as a nephel, a miscarriage. This is connected to the very well-known midrash that says that when Adam was shown the souls of all the tzaddikim that would come throughout history, and he saw the soul of David, but the soul of David had no years apportioned to him. And so the midrash says that Adam contributed 70 years of his life so that David, the soul, would have a way to come into the world. That's why we see that Adam lived to be at 930. And he was supposed to live to be 1,000, but he contributed 70 of those years. So that goes back to the Arizal saying, when you read Adam, it's Adam, David, Moshe, the Aleph, Dalet, and Mashiach. Aleph, David, Mashiach. And so here I'm bringing this because it's one of the secrets of Yanun Shemo, is that this is actually the strength of Mashiach. The strength of Mashiach is he will be able to descend to all of the fallen places and lift up sparks that no one else can. Because his very soul recognizes these places, comes from these places. So this is one of the reasons that at Sukkot time, so when we do Birchat Hamazon, the grace after meals, there's a special harachaman. Harachaman hu yakim Sukkot David hanofelet. O merciful one, lift up the fallen sukkah of David. So that represents Malchut, the kingship of David, that we ended up going into exile and losing that kingdom. The largest kingdom geographically was at the time of David. He conquered very close to the borders that were promised to Avram. But that kingdom fell. And that's what the Zohar means. Anyone who can slay the Nachash will merit the daughter of the king. And if you remember, we learned the daughter is Malchut. Remember, we connected that to the story of Rabbi Nachman, the lost princess, where it begins, there was a king who had 6 sons and 1 daughter. The 6 sons are the Sfirot of Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, Zer Anpin, and the daughter is Malchut. The daughter is Malchut. So this helps us understand the soul of the Mashiach, the power of the Mashiach. In the 11th chapter of Isaiah that we read right at the beginning of the class, it says that the Mashiach will slay the evil ones with his tongue. And so the tradition is, and Rabbi Nachman brings this also, that the weapon of Mashiach is his prayer. That he won't kill anyone with a sword, but he will be able to defeat the Nachash. He'll be able to defeat evil through the power of his lips. That's straight from Isaiah. Okay, just 1 or 2 more things. And that is, this is a famous teaching from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He said, if you take the word shaliach, a shaliach means a messenger. Of course, in Chabad, this is a very important concept because all of the representatives of the Lubavitcher Rebbe that he sent around the world are called shlichim, which is the plural of shliach. So the Lubavitcher Rebbe said that the gematria of shliach is 348. He said if you add a yud to shliach, it becomes 358. It becomes Mashiach. So what is this yud? Well, yud equals 10. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe explained, in other words, he is sending out messengers all over the world. They're his shaliach, his shlichim. But going back to the teaching of the Baal Shem Tov, that everyone has a point of Mashiach, has a spark of Mashiach. Well, this spark is a yud. Yud is the smallest of the letters. Its gematria is 10, which represents the 10 kochot, forces of the 10 sfirot. So the Lubavitcher Rebbe said that a shaliach, when they develop their own 10 powers of their soul, they then have awoken their spark of Mashiach. And that is what gives them strength to be a shaliach of the Rebbe. So that's a very important thing because it's speaking to all of us. You don't have to be a Chabadnik to understand that we're all God's shaliach. And the archetypal shaliach is Mashiach. Mashiach is a messenger of God. He is doing God's work. Just like Moshe was sent by God, and God spoke to Moshe and directed Moshe and helped Moshe. So God will do the same with Mashiach. We shouldn't have this idea that, unfortunately, other religions turned a concept of Mashiach into God or the Son of God. And that's not our belief. Mashiach is a human being, flesh and blood, but he is a elevated neshama, like Moshe was, and will be God's shaliach to do God's will. Mashiach isn't operating on his own. He is the ultimate shaliach. Another thing very quickly that we've mentioned, it's brought down in all the Sfarim, that the letters of Mashiach, when they're permuted, spell out Yismach. He will be joyous. And his joyousness will bring joyousness to the whole world. In other words, if someone is a sourpuss, they're not going to make other people happy. They're not going to bring joy to other people. In other words, to bring joy to other people starts with the person themselves being joyous. It's contagious. It spreads. So Mashiach, the letters of Mashiach are Yismach. Another permutation of Mashiach is Shem Chai, the living name. And this is connected to, in the Garden of Eden, when God brought all of the animals in front of Adam to name the animals. And so it says, whatever Adam named them, Hu Shemo, that was their name. Hu Shemo is Gematria Mashiach. So this is the messianic consciousness of Adam. He was able to identify what the essence of everything. And so this idea of Shem Chai, Hu Shemo, that the Mashiach will infuse all of creation, all of humanity with life force, with pure life force. That's why we read before that Rambam said that after Mashiach comes, and a person will be able to open the Torah and understand the workings of creation. The Torah will come alive. The Mashiach will come to reveal what's called Ta'amei Torah, the reasons of the Torah, the deeper essence, the deeper dimensions of the Torah, and the Torah will come alive. It will be just brimming with life. And one last thing I'll mention is in a different prophecy of Isaiah, he says that a young child will lead them, and the one who has compassion is the one who will lead them. And in Hebrew, it's ki mirachamam, the one who will have compassion on humanity. He will be the one to lead them. So this phrase, ki mirachamam, equals Mashiach. That's the secret of what Isaiah was hinting to. And this is connected to the two primary attributes of Moshe were his humbleness and his compassion. And this we've discussed many times. The Torah itself attests to Moshe's humbleness. And when you go through the whole story of Moshe, we see his compassion over and over and over again. And we're told that in the different opinions, will the Mashiach be more humble than Moshe or less humble? Will the Mashiach be greater in prophecy or less in prophecy? Will he greater in compassion or less? But the point is that just like Moshe's two great attributes were compassion and humbleness, so will the Mashiach's. But it's brought down that his primary will be his compassion. And that's what Isaiah is saying. The one who has compassion on the world, he will be the one to lead them. And this, again, this phrase, Ki merachamam, equals Mashiach. So we should be blessed. I just want to say, obviously, we haven't learned everything there is about Mashiach. We could go on and on, but we did our best. And the important thing, though, is that we try to draw the future into the present, especially now where things are difficult, are challenging for Jews all over the world, for those who love Israel, for non-Jews also who love Israel. These are difficult times, very difficult times. And yet, we have Emunah Shalema that somehow this is drawing us closer to the Messianic era. We have Emunah Shalema that it will come. It will come in its time, but we want to be meritorious and quicken it as much as possible. And so, by doing good deeds, by learning Torah, by doing mitzvot, by helping others, but also, like the Lubavitcher Rebbe said, by making ourselves worthy vessels for God's light, for the light of Torah, for the light of Shabbos. This will help bring the Mashiach. May we merit to see it soon